today with us Grace Joseph, who is a student at the University of Waterloo. And I'm going to put her on the floor first to tell us about herself, her life and leading up to coming to University of Waterloo.
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share a little bit about myself. So first of all, as you said, my name is Grace. I do attend the University of Waterloo as a master's student, but there was a long journey in coming there. And so it started a long time ago. First of all, I guess about me, I was born in the US. So I was born in a very small town called Lamoni, Iowa, to two parents. I am of mixed race. So my dad is Guyanese, which of course is a mixed race in and of itself. So from both kind of two different areas in Guyana, my grandmother is more from the Indian background, whereas my grandfather is from the African background. And then my mom is from the Midwest and has lived in the Midwest her whole life. But if you go back into her background, she is kind of Scottish and French and a few different other countries mixed in there. So when it all comes down to me, you would definitely say I'm of mixed heritage. And it's something I definitely, I cherish, and it's an interesting experience. But growing up in Lamoni, it was a very small town and definitely not ethnically diverse. And so as I grew up and my parents were raising me there, they decided to take a big move and move to Canada when I was about 10 years old. And part of that was, of course, for opportunities for my parents, but it was also for opportunities for their children and me. So one of the great opportunities about that was Canada and Ontario is a very, very diverse area, especially compared to where I had come from. And so at that point, I was when I really started to kind of think about what I wanted to be and who I wanted to become. And there were lots of options, which was exciting and also scary. And so at the end of the day, I did pick Waterloo by the time I was ready to make that sort of decision about the next phase in my life. And I really picked Waterloo because it had such a great reputation for not only being such a great academic institution, but also really preparing you for the workforce. And that was important to me. I wanted to get a degree that would allow me to be independent and stand on my own 2 feet and support myself. And I felt like Waterloo would really set me up for that. So that's really why I picked Waterloo, and a little bit about me in terms of my background as, kind of what makes me up. But then some other things just about me are, family is super important to me. So I'm the oldest of 3. I have 2 younger siblings, a sister and a brother, and I really enjoyed the pandemic world right now because we've been able to spend a lot more time together. And then I'm someone who really is a social person. So pandemic has been hard in that sense, and that's why I've really hung on to my family. And so I'm looking forward to being able to travel and see my friends and things like that again. But that's just kind of a little bit about me. And I guess the last thing I would add is that at Waterloo, I study accounting and finance. So I'm in the Master's of Accounting program and just finished up my undergrad in the fall. And so I'm now in 8 months of my master's, hoping to get my CPA and work in public practice once I'm finished.
Okay. Wow. It really resonated with me when you said your parents moved to Canada, because my parents are Jamaican and English. Okay. And they left England to go to Jamaica to raise their children there for a very similar reason to what you just said.
For sure.
So growing up, where in Ontario did you grow up? Because it sounds like you moved.
Yes.
Ontario is a big place.
It is. So I grew up in Aurora, Ontario, so just about an hour north of Toronto, in the GTA. And my dad worked in Toronto, so we would be downtown quite a bit, but I grew up in the suburbs there.
Okay. And so did you think, and this is the Alliance, and we're talking about educating people, and you're a woman as well, growing up in this society here, and I tend to, be very passionate about that, because in my area, there are very few women. Are there many women in your area of study?
Many women?
Yeah.
I would say that in accounting and finance, it is the accounting side is a more diverse profession in my experience, just throughout the co-ops I've had. It is fairly split. And I think one of the reasons that I picked accounting, I said, is so I could be independent and, stand on my own 2 feet and feel like I could could provide for myself. But another thing, and understanding that I am a woman and I would like to have a family one day, and there will be a challenge in balancing family dynamics and work dynamics, is accounting is one of the professions that you can have a part-time career in and work half the time and kind of come back into to keep your skills sharp. And that was something that was important to me because I knew that balancing would be a challenge, and that if I wanted to continue to be able to prioritize my family life and my work life, I would need to pick a career that would be understanding of that. And so that's one of the reasons I picked accounting, and I hope that that will continue to be true in my own experience as I enter the field.
Do you have, and that's so true, and that's, so many women have to give up their career, and you've obviously thought this out well.
I try to be a bit of a planner. It's true.
Okay. But I think it's important that family and work balance be achieved, and it just makes a more rounded person. Okay, who would you say influenced your life in any way? It can be in any aspect of your life. Is there anybody who you thought, this is my role model, or the person that really influenced you?
That's an interesting question. I think, there's kind of two ways to look at it. One, that's someone you've seen from afar and never really gotten kind of the chance to really dig in. And that person for me 100% is Michelle Obama. And maybe it's cliche, but it's true.
No!
It's true. I, of course, have never seen her, dug into her mind and anything like that. But I like that, she got put on a big stage and she recognized the significance of that, and that there would be a lot of people who wanted to see her fail. And she did not allow anyone to push her around, and she held her space in her intelligence and in her role. And she, held herself with such grace and didn't allow anyone to kind of pull the rug out from under her and see her stumble, because she knew that how she represented herself would impact how other people saw Black women for years to come. And so for me, I see her and I'm like, okay, you know what? I've been given lots of opportunities in my life, and I want to make sure that when I go there and I be there, I hold myself in that same way, because in her doing that, she's really sent the elevator back down. And it kept that space open for other Black women as time goes on. And you've seen that recently in the election, that things have continued to change, and it hasn't necessarily always gone the other direction. But in terms of someone who I actually see and I've interacted with, I would say for me, it's my grandmother. I became a lot more close with her, of course, when I moved to Ontario. She's from around here. And she is someone who's just really worked hard. She hasn't always had all of the opportunities, but she's someone who's decided that, when she lived in Guyana, my grandfather came to Canada to study, and he studied at McGill and out east and went to school, and he wanted to return back to Guyana and, stay in more of a stable life that he knew with his family. And my grandmother said, absolutely not. We will be going back to Canada. And so she worked really hard, and it wasn't always a straight line, but she's someone who continues to push for great opportunities, and she still works to this day. So she really teaches me that hard work is important. And if you set a goal for yourself, keep going, even if it's not exactly the path you thought you would originally take to get there.
It's funny because when I was interviewed, Michelle Obama, have you listened to her podcast?
I have heard a little bit of it, but not all of it. I was trying to balance school and all of everything right now,
no,
but I'm excited.
Listen.
Okay.
It's so inspirational.
Oh,
and
wow.
Her work with young Black women was one of the things that really struck me. I mean, I've read her book, and, a lot of what comes over in the podcast is in the book, but it's so good to hear her talking about it. Last summer when we were on lockdown and I have time to go for walks,
yes,
that's what I listened to.
That's perfect.
But no, that's so interesting that the matriarchal person, as we would call it, in your family is your grandmother, who would have gone through a lot coming to Canada, all of that.
For sure.
So for you, have you done anything? Has this last year inspired you, with all of the BLM movement, that type of thing? Has it moved you? How has it affected you?
For sure. And I'll be honest in this. I would say that prior to this year, or I guess during this year, I've had a lot of conflict internally about the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously, I really support it, but I've had well, first of all, something about me is I'm, of course, of mixed race, and I grew up in a predominantly white area before I was 10. And then even Aurora is more of a predominantly white area. And so a lot of times my peers are white, and I may be the only person of color that they interact with on a regular basis and are comfortable with. And so I found I received a lot of questions about the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was hard for me because I'm not an expert. You know, I have my own experience and I have my own family's experience and I have what I've learned, but I'm by no means an expert. And so I would say that the movement, number one, really pushed me to try and get more educated. But it also was hard for me because for those who have lived in the Black community, this was not news. A lot of the times the treatment and things that have happened to the Black community was not surprising. It was something that we've heard about and maybe not experienced personally, but other people in our lives have experienced for a while. And so I had a hard time reconciling with people coming up to me and saying, wow, have you heard about this? Like, it's horrible. And I'm like, yes, I agree it's horrible, but it's been horrible. And this is not the first thing. So I think reconciling for me with, number one, the fact that, you know, it's a positive thing that people want to hear about this and get on board, even if they haven't been there before. And then the other thing is pushing myself to get more involved and learn more, because it's not necessarily a bad thing that people are reaching out to me and having questions. It just means that it's my duty to get more educated and learn more about the space so that I can maybe provide some information that would be helpful to those people. So that's something that I would say I've pushed for in the last year, but I should continue to push for. It's an ongoing, there's always more to learn and to experience, because of course my experience as a mixed race woman is different than lots of different people's experiences in the Black community and even those in my own family.
Well, I can relate. So, yes.
I'm glad to hear.
And because I was reared in the Caribbean, I mean, I've lived in Canada for 7 years.
Okay.
So all of my life before was in Jamaica.
Wow.
Apart from going away to university, which
Yes.
was my first real experience of having, and I went to university in England and in Michigan.
Okay.
So that was my first real upfront sort of having racist incidents happen. But then I went back to Jamaica and back in my bubble.
Yes.
It's all perfect, but it's a different type of situation.
For sure.
Okay. So in your trying to educate yourself, have you read anything that you would recommend to anybody, or, you know, any podcast or anything like that?
I would say, to be honest, I have not read as much as I should, but I have well, to start off, my sister is someone who is much bigger in this space than I am. And she's really one of my role models in terms of staying educated, and that she's doing a research project right now about racialized individuals on campus and accessing sexualized violence resources. So she is really she kind of does the reading for me and then comes back and is like, okay, here's what we've learned. And I'm like, okay, here's what we've learned. So I would say that she's really my number one go-to resource. But one book that she has recommended to me that is on my bedside table for a read is, I think it's called So You Want to Talk About Race. And having those and I think what she's told me is it's about having those conversations with people and kind of what you should think about before you enter into a conversation about talking about race, and understanding some of those preconceptions that you might have and how they may impact those conversations that you decide to have. So that's next on my reading list.
No, that's a good point. And I think what we also have to realize, which comes across with you as well, is that we all have different experiences.
Definitely.
You know, some of us have an African background. Some of us have a US background. Some of us have a Caribbean background. And they're all different. So you can't I mean, it's just like among white people, you have Europeans who are Polish and Germans, and we're all different, and we're culturally different. And for you, it's exciting because I'm sure you have a culture melting pot in your house.
Yes, that is definitely the case.
Even in types of food and
100%.
things like that.
Yes.
So going forward, what would you like to see happen in the world?
Oh, wow, that's a big question.
It is. I
Um,
know. You can take one piece of it.
yes. I guess for me, the first thing that kind of pops into my head is the idea that I would hope that people, and I feel like we're starting to see this, that people realize that racism is not just an issue for the Black community. And it's not just holding back the Black community, because there is excellence in the Black community. There are creative individuals, smart individuals, innovative individuals who have a lot to offer the world and society as a whole. And if you push to suppress those voices, the world as a whole is the one who hurts. And so I'd like to see more people recognize just the excellence that's in the Black community, and that if you put it forward and you help to kind of break open that barrier, there will be a lot of change in this world that's for the positive. So I hope to see that, and I feel like we're starting to see that.
No, definitely. I agree with you on that. And, it's one step at a time. And
Definitely.
funny, I'm watching a show at the moment that's really like a soap opera in some respects. No, it's about slaves in Colombia
Oh,
around the abolition period.
okay.
And I did know this before, but it was interesting. The abolition laws were put in place, but abolition didn't happen right then. Slaves were still slaves, and in parts of,
Yes.
Colombia, for example, where this whole thing is done,
Hmm.
one part would have slaves being freed and another part would not.
Yes.
And, it's all of these things that now that you're watching them, you realize that change doesn't happen overnight.
Mm.
And, the change that you might put in place would be for your children and my grandchildren, that type of thing. So,
It's true. It's almost like a relay race. You kind of get the first leg, and then someone else has to take off from there.
there's a guy called Lenoi Woolry, Carol Woolry, and I have to give him credit because I've said this a million times. He
Hmm.
said, like, we're on a 4x100
Yes.
leg, and we're
Hmm.
on the third leg. And each
Okay.
leg takes like 100 years. So the
Wow.
first leg was the abolition of slavery, second
Hmm.
leg, Jim Crow, and we're now on the third leg. And I just think that analogy is
That's
exactly what
excellent. Yes, that really is. That puts it into a nice visual perspective.
right. And it
Hmm.
did that for me when he told me that.
Yeah.
So, the final question: what are you most proud of that you have achieved in your short life?
Yes, my very short life. For me, it would be graduating from my undergrad. It was important to me. It was important to my family, and it wasn't the straightest line to get there. Um, in high school, I decided I wanted to be an accountant. There were so many good things about it. After grade 11 accounting, I was like, I'm a natural born accountant. I was made for this. And I got to university, and turns out that was not the case. And there's a reason it's a 5-year program to become a certified accountant. And so I think there were stumbling blocks for me along the way. My first semester went great. My second semester was really challenging. I didn't do as well as I thought I would. I had high expectations for myself, and I stumbled for sure. But I'm proud of myself in the fact that I got back up and kept going. It wasn't necessarily the straightest line. In the world of accounting, those who know, co-ops at the big four accounting firms are the goal. And I did not get one my first co-op. And oh, I was so upset. I was very upset, but I got a different job and I did that job and I learned from it. And, you keep moving. And I signed a full-time offer at a big four firm in September that I'll start then. And so just because I didn't get it right away and it wasn't exactly how I thought it would go, I've still at the end, I have the paper, and I feel like I've learned a lot along the way and had a different experience that will guide me in different directions through my career. And so I'm proud of myself for that. And I mentioned earlier my grandmother, who has kind of shown me that and demonstrated that, at the end of the day, she ended up where she wanted to be, but it wasn't the path she thought it was going to be. And, coming to Canada for her wasn't a straight line. It was challenging and hard, and it probably would have been easier just to stay in Guyana and have her life there with her family, but it doesn't progress her future generations. It doesn't give me the opportunity that I have. So I think for me, I was proud because other people worked hard to give me the opportunity I had today, and I didn't let stumbling blocks along the way stop me, just like they didn't allow stumbling blocks along the way to stop them.
I think I should take that tip from my swimmers, especially that co-op part. I,
Mm-hmm.
they get so upset that they didn't get that particular co-op job. And,
100%.
I'm like thinking to myself, guys, you will just keep on plodding.
It's true. It's so hard to hear in the moment. Then I was so upset, but it's true. As time goes on, you realize like, oh, you know what, that was okay. And it allowed me to have way different opportunities. Like I have a lot of, I would say, breadth in my co-op experience, which is like, oh, you know what, I learned that I don't really like that kind of co-op, or you know what, that's something I want to think about in the future. I liked financial planning and analysis. Maybe I want to circle back to there. Whereas if I'd been on the path I originally thought of, I would have never even known that those things exist. So
And
it is hard to hear at the time, but
I said it was the last question, but
mm-hmm.
it triggered another thought in me.
Yes.
Your boss in the athletics, because I gather you worked in the athletics department.
Yes, that is
Your
true.
boss speaks very highly of you, and the alliance originated in the athletic department.
Mm-hmm.
And we are spotlighted. So could you just give me, what did you think about working in the athletic department?
Yeah.
Just as a synopsis on that.
For sure. So I was really fortunate to work in the athletic department, and I hope maybe to return once the pandemic's done, if I'm not done my degree by then. But for me, one of the best things about working there was providing me a whole different community. So I went to school for accounting. Those who know campus, Hagee Hall is way at the front of campus, and that is where I did all of my studying. And so I'm kind of in a bubble of just like-minded people who are all studying the same things. But when I got into athletics, I met so many other people who were studying different degrees, came from different backgrounds, and we're just like a really positive group of people working together. And so that was my favorite thing about working in athletics, was meeting different students, having those different connections, and just a really positive group of people who are doing good things, working hard in school, doing well in athletics. I have a ton of respect for the student athlete. I've seen it firsthand through my work there, but also through my own family's experience in athletics, and it is hard work. And so those definitely give, when you see student athletes who are working, doing their sport and doing school, you're like, you know what, I can probably just do my school and come to this job, So I would say that was really the positive experience for me for working at the department. It's a great group of people. They really support one another, and they come together to put on great events and provide a great service for the rest of the student body. That's really important to kind of round out the student experience, I think.